Oh shit, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the Square the Circle music channel. It's your old pal Mage, that's me. That's right, we're talking about circles and squares today, tonight, like we always do. We're going over music appreciation and like vinyl record collecting and all that great shit. So wanted to start off with the obligatory reminder, everybody, head over to like Instagram and visit me on my Instagram page and like some of my photos and give me a heart or a thumb up or however they do it over there. I don't even give a shit. But, follow me or whatever. I'm Square the Circle Records on Instagram. I don't have a Facebook page, so I'm not going to shout out for that. But yeah, I've been on YouTube now for just about a year. I think the first video I uploaded was late February last year. So happy birthday to the Square the Circle music channel. Don't forget to go to some of my, history of my uploads and like scroll down and like look at some of the other stuff. There's a little bit of something in there for everybody. So like and subscribe. Thank you very much for all of your attention and soaking it all into me and giving me all of your love. I need it to survive. Thank you very much. So we're going to go on and talk about music. Tonight, we're going to talk about something very near and dear to my heart, a genre of music that I sure do love and appreciate. We're going to talk about my top 10 favorite electronic albums. Anybody that has watched my videos, followed me, my channel, this and that, knows how much I love electronic music and where my tastes kind of gravitate towards. So just as a kind of like a precautionary kind of like anyone that's expecting some EDM records or some crazy industrial hard rock heavy metal shit from the 90s and stuff, like you're not really gonna see that stuff. I'm more of kind of like an ambient kind of that type of guy. So I'll quit babbling and I'll just get right into it. Like I said, these are my top 10 favorite electronic albums. So it's going to kind of be really just kind of an all-encompassing kind of subjective type of, not necessarily a top 10, but just my 10 favorite. And like I said, it's a pretty broad spectrum. So, bear with me here. If you see an artist that I bring up that you wouldn't necessarily agree is an electronic artist and kind of like belongs in a separate subgenre or whatever, whatever, tell me in the comments. That's fine. Like I said, my opinion is subjective just like everybody else's. So I'm just going to talk about my favorites. Here I go. Number 10 on my list. I've talked about this artist before. Actually, I brought up this exact album before. Really fantastic artist, really fantastic album. A gentleman that I believe comes from Australia. But his name is, what's his name? Something Martin. Martin Kennedy. An Australian man who does all of this fantastic music himself, and what he calls himself is All India Radio. This is an album called Desert Tapes. I brought this up before just because it's just fabulous. I love the art. The art is exceptionally beautiful. It really kind of puts you in the mood for what you're about to hear when you put this on. And it just kind of takes you through that journey. I believe that this was all kind of like 8-track recording, like lo-fi tapes that he recorded like really early on before he even had a career. He's got a pretty banging career these days. He's putting out tons of material. So everyone check out his Bandcamp website and buy all his stuff. It's absolutely fantastic. But this one specifically, he was doing all kinds of like 8-track tape recordings and stuff like from the early 80s. Like this is all recordings from like the early 80s through the early 90s. And he just kept all this archival stuff that he was doing and then put out this LP and just called it the Desert Tapes. And it's just fucking phenomenal. It actually has a lot of like reminiscent sounds of stuff that is familiar from that era. Like I hear a ton of inspirations from John Carpenter and like all that stuff, all that really great like kind of moody horror film type of synth sound that you're getting from listening to like those 80s horror flicks. And like if anyone is a big fan or loves the music and the show Stranger Things, you know, that's the kind of vibe you're getting, is that like John Carpenter mixed with, you know, heavy inspirations by um, Tangerine Dream, you know. So if you like, you know, the Firestarter soundtrack by Tangerine Dream or anything John Carpenter's ever done, this is totally going to float your boat. And it's not just kind of like, you know, just kind of like pulling straight from that stuff. Like it's inspired by, but it definitely has its own unique qualities and its own flair. Um, I really love and appreciate this artist. I ordered this LP from him, and he wrote me like a personal note in here, and it's like slipped it in here, and like he does his own stuff, and really really great artist. So everybody check out All India Radio, and the just multitude of stuff he has to offer the world, and all the music he's put out there. Um, so yeah, that's number 10 on my list. It's really fantastic stuff. Everybody check it out. Next on the list, another artist that I have brought up before, but not specifically this album, actually an EP that this gentleman released um, last year, was on my top 10 of 2021. This is a full length LP that he released the year prior in 2020. Another magnificent gentleman, multi instrumentalist, composer, less on the scale of kind of like, you know, lots of heavy synth and drum machine and, you know, groove oriented like the artist I was just talking about, All India Radio. This is more of kind of like a contemporary composer type of gentleman, and really kind of approaches things from a real like symphonic and orchestral type of world, if I'm making any sense. But yeah, contemporary composer Daniel Davies. And this is his LP from 2020, late in 2020, called Signals. I've mentioned it before. The EP that was on my top 10 list of just this last year that he came out was kind of like a continuing thought to this album. It was titled Spies, but this one is it's just magnificent. I had just mentioned John Carpenter and the influence that John Carpenter obviously had on, you know, Martin Kennedy and his project All India Radio. John Carpenter actually appears on this album and assists Daniel Davies in his compositions and all the instrumentations that he's doing. At least on one track, I know for a fact, on the track called Destructive Field, which is very, very reminiscent of, like I said, that John Carpenter sound, like, you know, the Halloween soundtrack, you know, just really like, you know, foreboding and moody. And that's what you're getting from this album. This album is just very, I wouldn't say dark, but very moody and somber in parts. But there's, like I said, he's really approaching it from like a modern day contemporary composition sort of flair, where all the instrumentations he's playing them all, and there's a lot of acoustic guitar and there's a lot of like, you know, solo piano stuff. So you're not just getting like overwhelmed by the electronic synth sound. There is a lot of that drone synth sound in the background, interjecting in and out, but it's always like accentuated with just little, you know, snippets of, like I said, you know, acoustic instruments, just piano and guitar, and just really fantastic stuff. And it just kind of goes from piece to piece to piece. Everything, it's really digestible, because it's not long pieces of just droned out crazy madness, which I do love. But these are all nice short snippet, you know, 5-minute pieces, 6-minute pieces, and almost kind of feel like they're almost kind of a rock song, you know. But it doesn't have, you know, simple 4 on the floor rock and roll drum beats and that type of stuff. There is like lots of guitar work, electric guitar work as well. So you get that feel of kind of like this being like a moody, dark synthwave, almost kind of like post-punk, you know, type of feel to it. Yeah, that's the vibe I get, is that like post-punk 80s kind of like, you know, My Bloody Valentine, Echo and the Bunnymen kind of thing. I don't know. It's really fucking fantastic. The gentleman who did all the art for this is just beautiful. It's all these beautiful like landscape with superimposed like geometric figures everywhere. It's got this beautiful booklet that comes along with it. I wish I could remember the artist's name who does it, but you know, it's so fantastic. Like I said, so you have these landscape photographs, but then he, you know, superimposes computer generated like uh, all kinds of interesting geometric figures and stuff. Like this coastline looks like it could be like the Oregon coastline, but then you have these really bizarre, cool geometric figures just kind of like jutting out of nowhere. I love this type of shit. It's so fantastic. So yeah, such a great companion to the album itself, and listening to the music and thumbing through this, it just an overall, you know, experience. And that's, you know, that's why I love this type of electronic music. It's just really meant to be, you know, an overall experience in art, and an experience in art. So yeah, again, that was an album called Signals by Daniel Davies, 2020. So that's my number 9 pick. Number 8 on my list. This one, heading into the realm of the semi kind of bizarro type of stuff, but this had to be on my list because when I discovered this years and years ago, I thought it was so unique and so fantastic and so cool. I gravitate toward that really ultra nerdy kind of shit, which is, you know, which is kind of odd, I suppose, because I'm not a very well read and not a very highly educated person at all. Like I, you know, dropped out of college at least twice, so I never got any type of degree, never paid attention. You know, I'm not an academically like, you know, minded person. But this type of stuff just really, it just enlivens like my senses and my brain, and just kind of like makes me want to like research things. It makes me want to like read about this stuff, because I love this type of shit. But this is a classic electronic album by an artist who can be kind of coined as being one of the founding fathers of modern day electronic music. Amongst the likes of, you know, all the greats, you know, from the early on days. We're talking, you know, Mort Garson and Isao Tomita, and, you know, all the stuff that was like, you know, going on way behind the scenes, when people, it was more about playing with the science of it. You know, it was more about playing with like the synthesis and the actual computation and the designing of these machines, you know, stuff that was like even predating, well, like, you know, what Keith Emerson was doing, but not so like showboaty, you know. And but yeah, you know, what Wendy Carlos began doing and experimenting with, and just all those great machines and all that cool shit, you know. This is one of the early, you know, early stage gentlemen that kind of like, you know, was a grandfather to the electronic music scene. His name was Charles Dodge. And he put out this 1970 release on the Nonesuch label, just called Earth's Magnetic Field. This is really, really fucking cool. It's kind of, like I said, kind of on the border of the bizarro. So if anyone who loves electronic music, if you're like, oh, what's this? This is interesting. It's going to be filed in your electronic music section of your record store. But it's not necessarily something that you can really put on and really like get enveloped into, and it's not going to be like really sonically pleasing to most people. So I guess this bears quite a bit of explanation. I'm going to do my best. Like I said, not the most intelligent person here, so I'm going to try my hardest. But so what this man did, Charles Dodge, was he got involved with a bunch of like PhD, you know, Harvard scientists or whatever the fuck, and they, in the late 60s, somehow the corona of the sun it had some of the most activity it had ever been recorded in human history, and they started being able to really measure these sun flares with a new level of instrumentation. It was like a new new metric that they devised in this system called like the KP meter or something like that, and they could finally like measure all of this like heightened activity of the sun's corona and all these big sun flares that were flaring up, which was causing Earth's magnetic field to be highly disturbed. And so a lot of these scientists were like, what the fuck is going on? We need to check this stuff out. Well, anyway, he got involved somehow with these, PhD motherfuckers, and was just like, they figured out a way to sonify the sonification of the disturbance of Earth's magnetic field via these, sun flares that were going on. And they had some sort of metric, like I said, that KP metric that they were using, and they could sonify it into, they recorded it and sonified it into levels to where they had stages of it, and it could be represented in either the 5-tone, scale of the pentatonic scale, or like a full-on, chromatic scale. And they ended up having both ways of doing it anyway. Sorry, that's really crazy and long-winded. I'm doing my best, but long story short, that's what Charles Dodge did. Was he took this huge, long, metric that they were able to record like 18 to 20 minutes of these solar flares that were disrupting Earth's magnetic field. They got it recorded and then basically turned it into music. And he plays it, and it goes up and down like everything, like of course the notes on the scales, and he uses those, but then he also, there's moments where the flares act up and they can actually they accelerate an accelerando, and there's like retardando, and there's different modes where it's like going faster and slower, up and down. It's just it's so intriguing and so fantastic. It's really cool to listen to, and it's like you kind of have to, like, you really have to put it on, and you should read about everything as it's going on and as you're listening. And yeah, it's like 28 minutes on both sides of just like really intense, cool shit, and it just makes you want to just really research all of this badass stuff. And honestly, coming from a standpoint, and a guy that I kind of like drone ambient electronic, and so this is something that I can tolerate. A lot of people who are like more into just kind of like, ambient electronica and stuff like that, or kind of like, beat oriented electronic music, like this might drive you crazy. But I find it really intriguing and really interesting and really fucking cool. So it had to be number 8 on my list. So check out 1970s, released by Charles Dodge, Earth's Magnetic Field, on the None Such label. Classic shit. Everybody check it out. It had to be on my list of best, greatest electronic albums. So there's that. Oh boy. Here's another one, number 7 on my list. Another one that I have brought up and mentioned before. I believe I brought this out, on, like I said before, scroll down and check out the history of my videos that I've uploaded. And this was one I uploaded, maybe back in like, April of last year. One of my favorite videos that I did, I've actually gone back and watched it a couple times just to kind of see what I talked about. And it's a pretty fun watch. It's a video that I did about music that you can share with your family if you have children. Music that's in your collection, I mean, not just like, soundtracks to Disney films and shit. Like music that's in your collection that you'll love, that you can share with your kids, and that your kids will probably like just as much as you do. So as you can imagine, on that list, there's a lot of like quirky, interesting, goofy kind of electronic music. And there was, and this album was on that. I think this was actually the top pick that I brought out, but I have to bring this out. This electronic, goofy prog rock, it's just a masterpiece really, by a Frenchman named Teddy Lassrey. well known and renowned in France amongst many of his other peers, because there was a lot of really excellent electronic and experimental, type of pop and rock music coming out of France in the 70s. Uh, but this guy, a little bit more kind of, in the background, kind of a little bit more obscure. This this album just titled E equals MC squared. Pretty badass. It's just got all those kind of like nerd titles, Birth of a Galaxy and Birds of Space and this and that. I've compared this before to, lots of like similar aspects of what you hear in like Mike Oldfield, um, but also some of that, much more electronic type sounding stuff. There's some really great, like, arpeggiated, synthesizer keyboard type of stuff on here where you can tell he's just like hitting that arpeggiator, and then he'll go over to his electric guitar and start meandering on that, and just lots of really cool experimental soundscapes that are really intricate, really kind of complex. I wouldn't say complex to the level of like being like, mathy or whatever, but there's some odd meter and there's some really great and clever, um, play with rhythm on this album. So um, this will just always be at the top of the list for me when talking about electronic music, because it's just a nerd's paradise. Anyone that loves electronic music, and especially stuff of a little bit more of the avant kind of experimental flair from this, like I said, 70s kind of prog era. This is right up your fucking alley. You'll love this shit. So yep, this definitely had to be on my list of the greatest electronic albums, in my opinion, in my collection. Um, okay, moving on to, I guess, what would be number 6, right? Something like that. I've brought up a lot of these albums before, so I hope this isn't frustrating anybody. You're getting to see a lot of the same albums you've already seen. Um, but I sure do love the shit out of these guys, and this album specifically. I hope they make more music, the two of them together. Separately speaking, they come from different groups that I've talked about before, and they themselves have done solo albums. They've teamed up with other guys from the label that they play with and other labels. Another one of my favorite kind of more kind of like electronic dance music, kind of like, I don't know, just kind of more like trip hop kind of dance Euro beat type stuff. So I didn't really include it on this list because it's almost kind of more like I said, just kind of like groove dance music. A guy from Germany named Urushious. These guys teamed up with him. Both of them individually have teamed up with him on other albums. But yeah, I love Ulrich Schnaus. So everyone check out Ulrich Schnaus. But yeah, I'm going off on a tangent. Anyway, these guys are fucking awesome. This is that album I've talked about before. It's called Always Already Here, on the El Paraíso record label, which I'm sure all of you have heard me talk about a billion times. Give them all your money. Go to their website and buy every fucking album that they have to offer, because it's all just amazing. It's a Scandinavian label out of Denmark, I believe, out of Copenhagen. A lot of the artists that are on this label hail from Denmark. I know specifically that the two gentlemen that created this album, Jonas Munk and Nicholas Sorensen. Nicholas Sorensen is the guitar player from a band called Papier, which I have talked about a million times. They're fucking amazing. Kind of like psychedelic jazz, stoner jazz, kind of not so much stoner jazz, but just like psychedelic jazz. It's basically got a whole new genre now. People just call it Scandi jazz. It's just Scandinavian jazz. Like, they have their own genre now. It's pretty cool, and it's all kind of been started by that band I just mentioned, Papier, with Nicholas Sorensen, but also this gentleman, Jonas Munk, who is, I think, guitar player and does some synthesizer work, and I think he drums as well, with another band I've mentioned a lot called Kazua Sui, another band that is on the El Paraíso record label. This is compositions and improvisations for synthesizers and electric guitar. and it's just divine. It's just absolutely divine, and it's exactly that. It's just lots of really, really subtle, cool, you know, synthesizer that's kind of like programmed with like, you know, interesting, like, you know, I said, like, you know, arpeggiators and all kinds of interesting Moog sounds, and just like really cool, you know, soft electric guitar, intricate picking stuff. It's just fucking, it's really, really cool. So anyone that likes jazz at all, you're gonna love the shit out of this. Anyone that loves the stuff that's just a little bit more kind of like mellow and experimental as far as the electronic sounds go. Um, it's not too bombastic, and it's not too over the top by any means in any areas of this. It's all very just kind of like linear fashion, straightforward. Has almost kind of like that kind of trancey kind of kraut rock feel sometimes. Really wicked fucking cool. I love the shit out of this album. This is this is like kind of almost making its way up to being on like my top, you know, 20 albums of all time. Honestly, I listen to this shit so much. It's so great. So everyone check this album out. It has to be on the top of the electronic albums for me. Okay, going into kind of more of a soft and subtle kind of tinkle tunes kind of realm when talking about the ambient and environmental soundscapes of electronic music, which is, as you can tell, which is kind of more my bag. When I say my bag, it's just what I gravitate toward more than the more kind of like hardcore end of electronica. You know, not so much the electronic dance music or the, you know, industrial music and stuff like that. I'm not so much into that. This is the antithesis to that. This is an amazing, I believe it's just one person that makes this music, but this is a project called the Billo Observatory. This is an eponymous album, self-titled, just the Billo Observatory. I'm not sure when this was released. It was all recorded between 05 and 11, so 2005 to 2011. Just a long series of all kinds of different sounds, and you know, a lot of what I've talked about with that band that I love called Stars of the Lid. Very reminiscent of that. You're getting lots of like soundscapes interjected with this, with like all kinds of, you know, tape reel and recording stuff of like, you know, people's voices, and like, you know, train and automobile sounds, and like kind of like random nature sounds, and all this kind of stuff just like hangs over your head, and you hear it in the periphery, in your aural periphery, you know. But then you have just like beautiful like drone, sometimes synthesizer drones, sometimes just plunking on the piano, just really mellow, enveloping, ambient, surrealistic. It's absolute beauty. This is just a beautiful, beautiful album. If anybody has, I believe there's at least probably 2 or 3 albums by who, man, I guess I should research this a little bit more. I find stuff and I fall in love with it and I buy it, and I don't always take the time to investigate exactly who it is and who makes the music, and where it comes from, and this and that. And this is so just kind of like, there's nothing to it. There's no inner, there's no insert. It doesn't say who writes the music, nothing. There's no credits, there's no liner notes, nothing. It's just self-titled Billo Observatory. Yeah, it's, I wish I could say more about it, but all I can say is it's haunting and beautiful. Again, very much like that artist that I brought up many, many times on my channel called Stars of the Lid. Very reminiscent of that. This one being a little more piano-centric and not so kind of, you know, Stars of the Lid is just really ethereal, drone, kind of out there, spaced out music. This kind of has more of kind of like, you're in the car and you have a destination. You know, this is more kind of like destination oriented. It's still kind of beatless. Actually, I think it is solely primarily beatless, ambient electronica, but you still feel like you have kind of like a destination, as opposed to the stuff like I was talking about with Stars of the Lid, where it's just really ethereal, spaced out there kind of stuff. So yeah, check out Billo Observatory. Fucking amazing, amazing stuff. Okay, getting into the last, last four. So, number 4 on my list, another one I've brought up before, but this is definitely a monumental, magnificent piece of electronic music history. In my opinion, I think it's his best work. I mean, a lot of people will say like all the stuff he did with like, Aphrodite's Child and whatever, like 60s, Vangelis. Everyone loves that kind of like really avant out there proggy shit, which I do too. But made way for the 70s, and he just really got into like the electronic scene and the mood, and thank goodness he did. This album, Albedo 0.39, it's just a magnificent work of art. It's just gorgeous. I've talked about it before. You'll hear snippets from this album all throughout television shows and cinema. It's been used in all over pop culture because he has that kind of flair about him, and just really knows how to write a catchy tune. On top of it just being really kind of groundbreaking, edgy, cool electronic shit. Funny enough, the artist that I brought up before, the Frenchman, Teddy Lassrey, they have competing tracks. I'm not sure which one it is. It's a really popular one. It made an appearance on the Carl Sagan Cosmos show, and it's got like some glockenspiel on it. I think it's called Main Sequence. I think that's the one. Not positive. That song and that Teddy Lassrey album, the E equals MC squared, they literally have that tune almost, they're almost exactly the same. Like total, somebody ripped someone off. That's what I'm trying to say. And I researched this because when I listened to that Eagles MC Square album, like maybe about a couple months ago, I was listening to it. I was like, what the fuck? It's got the glockenspiel on it. It's like in the same exact tempo and everything. I was like, that is a total ripoff of Vangelis's. And I was like, but wait a second. That Teddy Lassrey album was released in early 1975. This album was released in 1976. But I'm not sure. Yeah, this was recorded in 1976 and released in 1976. So I don't know. Either Vangelis ripped Teddy Lassrey off or vice versa. I'm thinking probably Vangelis probably was like overhearing some of that shit and was like, ooh, I like that. I'm going to add some glockenspiel into what I'm doing. Either way, this shit's fucking bomb. Love it to death. In my opinion, it's his greatest album. So everybody that likes kind of like, nerdy, eccentric, pop, electronic compositions from the 70s, you'll love the shit out of this one. Get it. Vangelis's Albedo 0.39. In the same vein of where we've been here, we're talking kind of like the 70s, the era of the, Eurocentric, eccentric, the Frenchmen and all these guys that were doing this type of electronic music. So it's so good. It's so great. A lot of you folks will probably, who've watched my channel before and seen my series that I do of little episodes. I call it, Tinkle Tunes is the name of the episodes that I do, but I highlight, ambient music, ambient electronic, and like, piano-centric music, and just kind of that type of stuff, soft jazz and stuff that would normally put, everyday listeners to sleep. But I've highlighted a bunch of that, and oh, where was I going with this? I kind of lost my train of thought. Sorry, but what was I gonna say? Anyway, this is an artist that I don't think I've highlighted on the Tinkle Tunes episode, but oh, I was talking about eccentrics and like European eccentrics and how great their electronic music is and how much, I mean, that's predominantly what this list has been, is kind of Eurocentric, type of stuff. And everyone's probably scratching their head because I bring up Japanese artists almost primarily all on that Tinkle Tunes episode I do. For some reason, I just feel that the Japanese kind of have a lockdown on the softer side, just kind of the softer kind of ambient environmental end of the electronic spectrum, wherein the more kind of like middle of the road electronic spectrum kind of is dominated, in my opinion, by the Euro guys, the Eurocentric stuff, like Brian Eno and these Frenchmen that I keep talking about and stuff. And then, of course, in America, they just like took it to the height and just kind of added hard rock and heavy metal and punk to it and whatever. But the middle of the road guys, those Europeans, man, I just love the shit out of what they were doing in the 70s, and you just can't beat it. JeanMichel Jarre and his Oxygene album and his Oxygene series, I think he did at least fucking 7 or 8 of these over a span of like 20 years or more. This one, the very first, I mean, just the art alone just fucking rips your face off, man. It's really, really amazing. I've talked about this album on my favorite album covers before. The artist, his name was Michel Granger. He did this art and actually was in an installation being shown in a museum of modern art in France, somewhere. I don't think in Paris, but somewhere. And Jean-Michel Jarre walked in with like a girlfriend of his at the time or some shit. And they saw that and they're like, what the fuck? Who is this? What is this? How can I be associated with this? He had already begun composing like the first few parts of this and talked to the artist, Michel Granger, and was just like, I want to involve this with my music, and can I use your art, and can we do like, and they ended up doing, they did a collective art installation and involved his music, and a lot of, I think he said like the first 3 parts of this were involved in the showing of a lot of this man's art. He also did the art for the Equinox album and I think a few others, but yeah, I mean, just a fucking masterpiece. Like 1976, like, I've read that, when this came out, people had never heard anything like this. I've had this in, this was around when I was a kid, like when I was a little kid. I had a tape of this shit when I was like in middle school. But my mom listened to this kind of stuff around the house. I remember this specifically being around, I mean, because the art and everything is just really captivating and memorable. But yeah, I just can't believe how just amazing and timeless this shit is. I love the way it unfolds. Every bit and piece, parts 1 through 7, it looks like, parts 1 through 6. It opens, it opens strong. Part 2 is kind of more soft and subtle. You almost kind of hear some interesting, like, cooing and weird, like, almost like whale sounds and stuff. I mean, this is all done just by, oscillators and Moog and all the stuff that he's doing with his synthesizers, but I even lists all the stuff that I love it when they do that. I love it when they list their instruments, because that's what's most important about this genre. And the pioneers of this genre is letting us laymen know, like, this is all the shit that I play, because I don't know anything about it at all. I love the shit out of it, and I don't understand. I don't understand the technological aspects of it. I don't, I've played music throughout my life, but like, I don't understand electronic instruments. Like, I can't even play the electric guitar. I just don't understand how the whole thing works. I'm all about like the hands-on, acoustic instruments. So this shit just like, it baffles me and it excites me and it interests me a lot. It tells, whatever a VCS3 synthesizer RMI harmonic is, and a Farfisa organ, you know, and of course, I mean, I know what a mellotron is, but yeah, pretty fucking ingenious, pretty amazing. So this one is like, has to be way up. It's number 3 top electronic albums of all time. Everybody that has any love in their heart for, like I said, Eurocentric, nerdy pop, electronic synth type stuff. This was the birth of like the beginnings of synthwave, you know, pop rock mixed with, you know, synthesis, electronica. Pretty fucking outstanding. JeanMichel Jarre, 1976, Oxygen. Okay, everybody, I'm going to try to wrap it up here because I know you guys get a little bit tired of me just yammering on about all the stuff that I love. But again, I want to urge you all to please like my videos and subscribe and share it. Share it with friends. If anybody you know is like, hey, that guy that watches YouTube, he's a total fucking dork. Like, you'll love his shit, you know? Show him my video. Share it around. Tell your mom. Your mom will think I'm really cute. She'll love me. So here we are, the last 2, top 2 on my favorite electronic music albums. I know you're all expecting this one, so I'll just slap it right across your face. This is my favorite Tangerine Dream album. I go over and over and again on, they have so many albums and they're all so fucking fantastic. And I do this, like every couple of years I change my mind. And I'm like, oh no, Phaedra is my favorite album right now, or, you know, they're all so fantastic. But I especially love Rubicon. This one feels more like a concept album than the rest of, and a lot of their albums are conceptually driven or are straight up one single concept. I do understand that. But Rubicon, this album really feels, you get the feeling of it being one large idea and one large composition, because it's also mellow from the beginning, and then you just have that big, you know, kind of like popular theme moment about probably like 8 minutes in, something like that, 7 or 8 minutes in, and then it just kind of like, it brings you up and then just mellows you back down again. It reminds me so much of one of Edgar Freese's solo albums. What was it called? Aqua. Yeah. If you have never listened to Edgar Freese's, it was right around this same era, I think. It was just a few years after. This is 73, right? I believe. No, sorry, a little later, 1975. So it was pretty close to the same. Edgar Freese, they didn't disband, but he just started doing a lot of solo stuff. And he did a solo album called Aqua. They could be companion albums, in my opinion, and it's just fucking amazing. It's just beautiful. You can really feel and sense Edgar Freese's like dominating presence on this album. And I love that theme. Like I said, that theme that they get into about like 6-7 minutes in, and just kind of really, it's a beautiful moment. I love the cover art. I love the color. I just love the overall feeling and aesthetic and everything I get from this album. It's just, yeah, this will probably be on my favorite, or I mean, it'll be my favorite Tangerine Dream album for a while. Maybe I'll go back to Stratosphere in another year. I fucking love Stratosphere. Stratosphere was the first, for me, the first Tangerine Dream album I ever owned. But yeah, they're all too good. This one's on my top 10. Number 2, I love Rubicon dearly. Okay, well, thanks again for joining me, everybody. This is my last one. It's my favorite electronic music album. Again, kind of gears toward the softer end of the spectrum, the ambient soundscape, electronic arena. Probably my favorite electronic artist. Yeah, I mean, this is one of my favorite electronic albums, if not my very favorite electronic album. And he happens to be probably, like, again, excluding all those environmental and ambient Japanese artists. It's hard. I shouldn't segregate, but I do, because for some reason, all of those ambient Japanese artists, just like, it feels like it should just be in its own separate genre, you know? So yeah, blah 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 blah. I fucking love Steve Roach. Steve Roach is my favorite nerdy, spaced out, ambient electronic composer of all time. You know, his Structures from Silence album is just epic. It's beyond epic. It's on my top 10 greatest albums of all time, in my opinion. And I've just never highlighted this one, so I didn't want to like bring out the Structures from Silence again and just kind of be like, oh, it's the best, you know. This one is just so special to me too because it's so in depth and so lengthy and so dreamy. It's called Dreamtime Return. Um, this is all like outlining. He talks about it's really fucking hippy dippy and crazy. He just talks about the synchronistic um, nature of what he was doing when he began writing snippets of this music, and because he lives and dwells in California, and then he like took like a life altering trip to Australia and wrote the last half of the album in Australia after like meeting Aboriginals and like um, seeing like, you know, cave paintings and all of the crazy like, you know, not scriptures, but I mean like, you know, like the glyphs, you know what I mean, like the glyphs in the cave, and hearing the stories that the Aboriginals were telling him of their history and how they were visited by, you know, lords of the stars and stuff, and all the pictures of like the spacemen on the caves, and like it's super fantastic, nerdy, awesome shit. And that's like what it's a double LP. There's so much fucking music on here. It's crazy. There's just like, you know, a lot of these trips are like 13-minute trips, 10-minute trips. Like there's so much music on here. And like I said, it's just all outlining like just this kind of like synchronistic, crazy journey from like being in westernized like comfort culture and then going out to the middle of the fucking, you know, Australian outback, and like also meeting just like all their crazy cool Aboriginal people and hearing all their amazing stories about, you know, their um, the birth of their culture, and you know, what am I trying to say? Their origin story. You know what I mean? Their origin story, and like how it is so completely different than everything that you hear about in Western cultures. Not entirely. A lot of the indigenous, you know, peoples of America have the same concepts and ideas that, you know, we came from the stars, we came from the star children, you know, or whatever. Yeah, really heady, really cool, spaced out, lots of heavy synth, practically beatless. Um, it's just immense and gorgeous, and it's just enthralling. This is like a masterpiece, an absolute masterpiece of electronic, yeah, Dreamtime Return by Steve Roach, 1985. 88, sorry, 1988. This is a Japanese, or excuse me, not Japanese. This is a German pressing. It's on the, you know, it's a subsidiary of Kuk Kuk in Germany, for Fortuna Records. But yeah, just beautiful. Anyone, if you have a chance, they repressed Structures from Silence just recently by him, so you don't have to pay $150 for a copy of Structures from Silence anymore, which is great. I don't think this has ever been reissued at all. So hopefully they will follow suit. And he's becoming very popular. I've seen a lot of his stuff being reissued lately. So I'm really hoping, for all y'all's sake, if you're into this kind of shit, that they'll repress this one soon, because it's tough to get a hold of, and you're gonna pay way too much money for it. But this is my favorite electronic album. So thanks again, everybody, for hanging out with me and talking about electronic nerd music. Yeah, I'll reiterate one more time. Thank you, and like and subscribe to everything I got for you. And head over and visit me on the old Instagram. And that's going to do it for this evening. So be good to yourself, be good to everyone around you. Play your music loud and proud. And peace be with you.